The final film in the episode, Full Metal Jacket, which was released in 1987, directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Stanley Kubrick, Michael Herr, and Gustav Herford. This film stars Matthew Modine, Adam Baldwin, Vincent D'Onofrio, and R. Lee Emery. With a budget of $30 million, this film had a worldwide box office of $166 million. Stanley Kubrick's take on the Vietnam War follows Private Davis, a.k.a. Joker, and Private Lawrence, a.k.a. Private Pyle, as they endure the rigors of basic training. Though Pyle takes a frightening detour, Joker graduates to the Marines and is sent to Vietnam as a journalist, covering and eventually participating in the bloody Battle of Hue.
Kubrick did something new with this film. He has made war films in the past with Paths to Glory and Dr. Strangelove. He did something completely unique again, where we not only see warfare in this film, but we see, I think, for the first time in a significant way in film, the preparation for war, where the first half of this film takes place at boot camp and the second half takes place in Vietnam. And during the boot camp storyline, we're shown the true extent of what it takes to turn young men into killing machines, and the trials that they go through while being trained in the art of warfare. And I think it's the definitive showcase for boot camp and military training in film history.
Yeah, when you think of film and boot camp parts in film and sequences, you think of Full Metal Jacket, you think of R. Lee Emery screaming in recruits' faces. It's the most memorable basic training sequence in all of war films. It's interesting to see how militaries have to break down their recruits before they even go to war. They have their own little wars and their own little battles before they even get there, while they're at home or while they're on a base against these drill sergeants. And the reason why drill sergeants have to break down their recruits like this and berate them and scream at them and even used to probably assault them is they had to get them ready for war. They had to get them ready for the horrors of war, to be able to react in war, and to be able to, essentially they were trying to turn them into desensitized killing machines.
Yeah, and also one of the main reasons also for this is because they had to take away the individuality of each person. And so if you take away the individual, they become part of a unit. And that's how you survive in warfare, and that's how you win battles, is if your soldiers act as one and act as a unit and work together for the greater good, for the success of the unit, rather than for themselves in their own survival. So by stripping away the individuality of each man, it brings them closer to become a soldier. And this whole boot camp is about taking away each man's humanity and each man's identity and individuality. And the film actually starts off with this by physically taking away their individuality by shaving their heads. And it's a really famous sequence in the opening of the film where we get the same identical shot of each character as their heads are being shaved before boot camp. And at first, they all obviously have much different hair, and they look very different and unique from one another. But once all their heads are shaved, they've become very similar looking. They've lost their identities in a major way by having their hair taken away.
I think just to keep going on that, like even men of different races, they all seem to kind of look exactly the same. They have the same look on their face. They've lost their individuality, like you're saying. You almost can't tell the difference between the black guys and the white guys because they all just look exactly the same now, like they're one entity. And it goes even further, where the first things that their drill instructor, Sergeant Hartman, is screaming at them is they're all equally worthless. He gives them nicknames instead of referring to them by their real names. We never even learn Joker's name, really. They just call him Joker. That's his character's name, is Joker. And Hartman tells them that if they survive boot camp, they'll become weapons of death, praying for war, not even human beings anymore.
Exactly. And I think that Hartman, the drill sergeant, is obviously the most iconic character of this movie. And Kubrick actually had an actor in mind, and R. Lee Ermey was actually serving as a consultant on the film. And for Kubrick, he carried out a few examples of what a drill sergeant would do. And Kubrick filmed these little playful scenes as a reference guide, and he loved what Ermey was doing so much that he decided that Ermey would be perfect for the role as an actor, not just as a consultant. And so this is Ermey's first acting credit, and he had a pretty good career. You've also seen him in Seven. He plays the captain of the police force in Seven, and shares a few scenes with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman in that movie. And this obviously was a defining moment in his life, and he became an actor after this movie, but he actually was a real drill sergeant, and he was actually carrying out the kinds of things he would really do in real life in the military bases.
Yeah, and I think they said he came with like hundreds of pages of obscene things to say that are in his head of things that he's already said to recruits and everything. And the actor who was originally going to play Hartman, he actually started, I think in rehearsals, they were running through a scene, and after 30 minutes of screaming, he lost his voice and he couldn't do it anymore. He's actually the guy in the chopper shooting at the innocent people.
Yeah, holding the gun.
Yeah, so that's actually the guy who was supposed to be Hartman, but he couldn't do it because you have to scream for basically like 5 weeks.
Yeah, and you couldn't imagine anyone but Ermi doing this now. I mean, I think he's become the definitive idea for what a drill sergeant is to the general public. And the one thing that this movie is a little fictitious about is that, yes, the drill sergeants and superior officers, they can get a little physical with their recruits and with their privates, but they never take it too far. There have been obviously instances of drill sergeants losing their tempers and taking things a little too far, but I think this film makes it seem as though it's a common thing to really cause physical abuse to the recruits, but that's not entirely factually true.
In this film, it's not a typical 3-act structure like most films, and it's really kind of 3 separate short films kind of put together with recurring characters. Mostly Joker is basically the main character throughout the whole film, and I think it's obvious that Kubrick did this because there are 3 very noticeable fades in this movie, which kind of ends one short story or one part of the film and begins the other. And for example, film 1, you could say, ends after Pyle kills himself at Paris Island. Film 2 starts in Vietnam on that busy street and ends with Animal Mother going into that building with the sex worker. And film 3 starts with the destroyed Vietnam city that the troops are walking through. So he kind of just flipped the story structure on its head and just kind of did his own thing here. This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is also brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your comfort, obsesses over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. And right now is a great time to get your holiday gifts from Manscaped.com for the men in your life, whether you got brothers, a husband, boyfriend. This is the best present you could ever get a guy, I swear to God. Use coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout right now. They have a 25% off sale running through Black Friday to Cyber Monday. For 25% off your entire order and free shipping at checkout, use Raiders of the Lost coupon code. And they just released their Performance Package 3.0. So again, 25% off your entire order and free shipping. Coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout.
Yeah, and even though Joker is essentially the lead in all these different, in these 3 parts of the film, the supporting actors are very strong forces in each part, and I think obviously in the boot camp scenes, it's Pyle and Hartman, and I think that story is, even though Joker is the lead, I think it's more so Pyle's story than anyone else's, because with Pyle, he starts out as the worst recruit there. He's just a lousy Marine. He can't do anything physically correct. He can't perform physically. He's constantly making mistakes and forcing Hartman to punish the entire crew because of him. And he's also sneaking snacks, and Hartman catches him with the donut in his case. And so he starts out as this a horrible excuse for a Marine. And throughout the physical and emotional and mental abuse he sustains from Hartman, he becomes a hardened killer. And it seems as though he might just be. It seems as though he might be succeeding as a Marine because he's becoming a good shot, and he's becoming adept at constructing and deconstructing his rifle, and he's become very meticulous and clean in how he's living. But also, Joker is noticing that this could be suffering from a mental breakdown from the abuse he's been experiencing, and he's right.
And so, in a lot of these war films, we're dealing with this concept of the duality of man, which Plato spoke about the duality of man when it comes to the mind and matter, and meaning that one part of man lives in his mind, thinking and observing, while another part moves and creates. And we're dealing with that concept here, specifically with Private Pyle, because, like you said, he can't do anything right. He's always getting in trouble, and that jelly donut scene's so famous where his locker is unlocked, and then Hartman searches and finds that jelly donut, and this is a turning point for Pyle, specifically because this is where Hartman decides that every time Pyle messes up, he's going to punish the entire squad for every mistake he made, which now turns everybody against Pyle, where that Pyle before this was kind of just a joke out of all the recruits, of all the corporals, and it didn't lead to too much because he was just punishing himself. But now everything he does that messes up, it affects every other corporal in the squad. And before this, Pyle was paired up with Joker because Joker seemed to be able to kind of help him keep pace with everything. And Joker kind of takes on this image or this role of like a mother to Private Pyle, because if you watch this movie again, watch Private Pyle. He acts like a child. He can't even tie the laces to his boots. He can't even do anything without Joker's help. And so you could say that the duality of man, where he's being shaped both obviously by Hartman, and maybe Hartman's this like father daddy figure for him, where Joker's the mother, but Hartman's giving him this side of humanity where it's pure killing and rage and fighting, and whereas he's kind of getting this human side from Joker that's a little more understanding and even sarcastic and fun at times. So he's kind of in this dilemma of being shaped by both of these men at the same time and not knowing which path to take.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's ultimately confused about and conflicted about who he is and who he's become, and he chooses to become a killer, and he chooses to end his own life, and he kills his abuser. He kills Hartman, and then he shoots himself, and it's a devastating moment in the film, and it's incredibly shocking, and that's the final moment we have in boot camp.
And right before that, though, there's an iconic scene where Pyle gets hazed by all the other corporals, and this is where he keeps messing up and causing more punishment for all of his fellow corporals, and it's in the middle of the night, and they tie him down with a blanket, and they all beat him with socks filled with soap bars, and every corporal takes part in this, and at the end, we have Joker, who even though is partnered up with Pyle and is trying to help him get along his training, he ends up being convinced and pressured into doing it too, and he's the last one to hit Pyle, and he hits Pyle the most and most aggressively out of everybody because he can't take it anymore, having Pyle slow him down and slow everybody else down.
Yeah, and Joker himself is a character who I think holds on to his humanity longer than any other soldier in the film, even throughout the warfare scenes.
And his individuality, which you were talking about earlier.
And his individuality, and that's why even after the boot camp and when we're in Vietnam, he's still pretty sarcastic, and he's still like a wisecracker, and he's still doing his John Wayne impression. And he is a contradiction from the other soldiers because many of them have been hardened by actual combat, and he hasn't seen combat yet. And so that's why he still has an innocent naivety about him, because he hasn't been involved in real warfare and he hasn't seen death or had to kill anyone yet. He even gets teased by the other soldiers because he doesn't have the 1,000-yard stare like the others do. And the 1,000-yard stare refers to that look that war-torn soldiers have, that look of like being in a daze and being frozen, and because they've become corrupted by war and warfare, and he lacks that because he's never been involved in real combat.
And again, this first act, or this first short film, ends with Private Pyle killing Hartman and then killing himself. And like you said, Pyle became exactly what Hartman wanted him to become, an emotionless killing machine. He just ended up becoming the preying victim of his own success, which is really ironic. And then the second part is basically opening up in Vietnam, and it seems like Joker's been in Vietnam covering the war for a little bit of time. His hair's grown back. He's got that like confidence and the Joker mentality again now that he's out of boot camp. And like you said, he still has that individualistic attitude about him, but he's also kind of, I guess you could either call him a contradiction of himself, or he has that representation of duality where he's wearing a peace symbol on his jacket, but he also has Born to Kill written on his helmet. So similar to Pyle, who had kind of like two identities forming, there's a killer and a moral person. That's kind of like what Joker's kind of pushing on himself in Vietnam now.
Yeah, he's never had the opportunity to really enact any kind of violence upon another person, so he hasn't tapped into that darkness within him that all of us have within us, the ability to kill. And I think he does it more so as just like a joke, because he's a joker, obviously. And so I think he wears these two contradicting items and symbols as a means to be funny, because he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand how he actually has the ability to be a killing machine, and he has the ability to be a killer.
This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our friends at movieposters.com. Use coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today, just in time for the holiday season. If you love movies as much as us and want to decorate your house, your apartment, your bedroom, it's the best website to use, especially with our coupon code Raiders15 at checkout for 15% off your order. They have great designs, framing, backlight, canvas, even plaque designs. Again, Raiders15 at checkout for 15% off your order from movieposters.com. Yeah, I mean, he's pretending he's a real killer. He tells people he's been in the shit. But he's basically run away from every opportunity he has had to kill. He claims to Hartman that he's a killer in basic training, but then he takes up journalism. So he's kind of been running away from battling his whole life, his whole time in the Army and the Marines, despite saying that he wants to fight.
Yeah, and soldiers like Animal Mother, he sees right through Joker. And Animal Mother, in a lot of ways, is like the perfect Marine that Hartman was always trying to get out of Pile.
He kind of did get that out of Pile.
He did get that out of Pile, but in terms of Animal Mother is a more perfect version of it, because he kills for his country.
Yeah, like the ultimate Marine.
Yeah, like he's just covered in bullets, and he just looks like he's looking to kill people. You know what I mean? And he as a hardened killer, he can see right through Joker, and he knows that he's never actually experienced combat before. In this situation, there with this squadron, we get to experience the first battle sequence of the film, and Kubrick uses his very famous style of filmmaking, the tracking shots, very wide shots. You rarely see close-ups. It's oftentimes it's just these big shots where it feels like you're in the environment, and the set pieces in this film are massive and impressive, and it feels realistic. And even though the set pieces are giant and complicated, he still carried out his famous Kubrick perfectionism of shooting take after take after take and going over budget and over schedule. And there's one scene where one of the actors was lying down in a defensive position, and they filmed this scene so many times that this actor spent an entire month lying on the ground.
Yeah, it's the sniper scene where obviously where the commanding officer of the squad is having them retreat, but then Animal Mother decides that he's going to lead an assault on this one sniper to save that guy. And in this kind of second short film, Joker finally does get a little taste of actual combat when the Vietnam army and troops tried to storm their barracks and storm their army base, their Marine base. And Joker finally gets a taste of shooting his weapon at men and firing his gun and getting a little bit of the shit, a little taste of it. And he seems to be enjoying it because he's at this time, safe in the comfort. He's pretty safe. They got a lot of guns pointing on that opening where all these men are pouring through. So it seems like it's almost an improbability that anyone would even get killed, any of the Marines. So he seems to be like in a safe situation to be able to fire.
He doesn't even take it seriously at first. He's like, oh, are they just trying to scare us? So he doesn't even think it's a real attack when it first happens. And so it shows that because he hasn't actually fought, he hasn't experienced it, he doesn't know what to expect.
And then on that helicopter ride in, we get the horrible image of the guy in the chopper shooting away the innocent men and women who are just trying to, I think they're just collecting food for their village or their family. And Joker says this line, he says, "How could you shoot women and children?" And ironically, he has to do that at the end of the film. Mm-hmm. He has to do both, kill a woman and a child.
And the reason for that is that gunner on the helicopter, he's just become a desensitized killing machine, and he lacks any kind of humanity now. And that's what happens in wars, is men are stripped of their humanity. And not only enemy soldiers, but the people who live in these lands, they become enemies, and soldiers will kill them without a moment's hesitation. And Joker just hasn't reached that point yet.
Not yet, because they end up leading that attack on that sniper, and they end up getting towards the building. And Joker gets in the building close to the sniper, and finds out that it's just this young girl. Again, it's a child in a woman. So he has to do what that chopper guy was doing, and he has to kill this young girl. And just like Hartman warned earlier in the film during boot camp, if you hesitate, you won't be prepared to kill, and it'll cost you, and you'll probably die. He hesitates, and his gun jams with his hesitation, and he's fortunately saved by one of his other men.
And then they wound the young girl, who is still alive but is experiencing a great amount of pain, and she's asking the men to shoot her, and the men are questioning whether they should give her a mercy kill or just let her suffer because she killed a couple of their men. And then Animal Mother decides that he'll allow them to kill her with a mercy kill as long as it's Joker who does it. And so Joker has to come face to face with killing someone, not just killing them out of defense, but executing them. And through the encouragement of his fellow soldiers, he ends up pulling the trigger and kills this young girl who was just defending her land. And it's a straight up execution. And then right after Joker shoots the girl, Kubrick keeps the camera on him, and then you can see in his eyes he slowly develops the 1,000-yard stare himself.
And I think this scene was perfectly foreshadowed at boot camp with the soap scene, the hazing scene, where again, when they attack Pyle in bed and they all haze and they all take their turns, Joker's the last one to do it, and he's peer pressured to do it. He's like, you got to do this. You have to do it just like everybody else. And so that's basically him. I think that was Kubrick foreshadowing what Joker would have to do at the end of the film, peer pressured into killing that girl, which he said he found disgusting in the helicopter.
He was trying as hard as he could to hang on to his humanity for as long as he could, in both those instances. And it reached a breaking point where he was put into a situation where he had to do it. And he destroys and strips himself of his own humanity and innocence once he pulls that trigger.
And I think Kubrick created a connection with this teenage young girl sniper and Private Pyle, where they're both very childlike, because obviously she's a child and Pyle acts like a child. And maybe this is a metaphor for civilian casualties in war, which are always immense, and also showing the death of youth in war and the corruption of innocence in war and loss of innocence. And then this is even shown again when the troops are marching along that
burning village,
the silhouette of a burning village with flames, and they're singing the Mickey Mouse song, which is insanely weird.
Yeah, it shows that they've completely lost their humanity and their innocence and their morality to sing a children's song as they walk through a war-torn, ravaged town that's been completely destroyed by them and their allied forces. And Joker says that in a world of even though he's inside a world of shit, he's glad to be alive and is no longer afraid. My favorite line of the movie is the dead only know one thing: it is better to be alive. So Joker realizes that in war, all that matters is surviving.
And I think that's also shown when Animal Mother and the others are standing they're standing over their dead commanding officer, and Animal Mother says something like, "Better you than me." And all the soldiers have their own line that's kind of along the lines of that meaning, or that sentiment.
Yeah, all that matters is surviving.
And the final image, I think, of the duality of man and that theme is after they execute the little girl sniper, and in this scene when they're all standing above her, their faces are lit up half with fire and half with this blue glowing light from the moonlight from the night, and it's every one of their faces, all their soldiers are lit like that, and it shows just the duality of man again.
This film was the last time Kubrick ever got an Oscar nomination. He got the Best Adapted Screenplay nomination, and despite the amazing career that Kubrick had and the incredible films, historic films that he made, Kubrick never won an Oscar for Best Director.
Yeah, he has 13 Oscar nominations, and he won for Best Visual Effects, I think, right?
Yeah, for 2001. So he never won the Best Director Oscar, so it's kind of, I would say it could be the greatest controversy in Oscars history that Kubrick never won. He got an honorary Oscar, but I feel like, that's not the same.
I mean, Scorsese probably maybe wouldn't have gotten an Oscar if he didn't make The Departed, which is absurd too. Yeah. So I think that, Oscars obviously are the pinnacle of the profession and the art in terms of being honored, but still there is a bias to it. And like you just talked about earlier with your Harvey Weinstein story, there are, there are controversies, and it is very political.
Yeah, it's very much about a marketing campaign more than anything. This film shot for so long that the actor Matthew Modine, who played Joker, in the span of the filming of the movie, he got married, conceived a child with his wife, and the child was born. Then the child turned 1 year old, all during the filming of this movie.
And I think I read that Kubrick wouldn't let him leave for the birth of his child, but ended up, after like a ton of fighting, he was convinced that he would let him go for that.
Yeah.
Vincent D'Onofrio gained 70 pounds for filming to play Private Pile in Full Metal Jacket. It's the most weight ever gained by an actor for a specific role, just above the 60 pounds that Robert De Niro put on for Raging Bull.